Welcome to the Exit Insights podcast. Today I've got some special guests. I've got Andy and Matt from Pennard Vets. Now, these guys have sold their business out to an EOT, Employee Ownership Trust, so I thought I'd bring them on, something a bit different, to share their experiences and how everything went. Guys, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Great. Hey, I'm wondering if there's a way to get started, if you can give us a bit of background around the practice, the business, and leading up to before you decided to go down the EOT route, just so we've got some context.
No problem. That'll be me then. So we're a really we think we're an interesting business. We've been here 125 years and counting. When the business was first set up as a single site here in our main site in Sevenoaks down in Kent. Over the years, that's been added to, and we're now at 6 sites. We've gone from 4 to 6 sites in the last 5 years, and it's a mixture of large multidisciplinary sites where we have consulting, we have surgery, we have hospital facilities, we have our X-ray facilities, all the whistles and bells you'd expect from a sort of high-end vets. And we've also got a number of small single-person branches, which are more like your kind of human GP surgery, if you like. You go along for a consultation, see the vet. If your pet needs anything more done to it, then they come to the main site. So structure-wise, that's a sort of quick overview of what we're like. We also run our own emergency service, which means we provide round-the-clock care 24/7, 365, which is relatively unusual for practices these days. Most practices outsource that, but we keep that in-house. So we have a comprehensive service and structure there, and we've always been focused on growth, on development, on innovation, always looking to see what the next progression we can make is. So we don't like sort of sitting still and resting on our laurels, because if you're not going forwards, you're going backwards.
Yeah, one of my colleagues used to say, if you're not growing, you're going. So same story. So 125 years, I'm guessing you guys aren't the founders?
We've aged really well, I can tell you. Yeah, so we've been here from between like 99 through till about 2004 or 2003, that type of period of time. So each of the 3 of us have been employed with the practice that length of time, and indeed Andy and Caroline have got a longer history as students in practice with the practice when they were at school.
Okay. And how did you guys come to being the owners of the practice?
So it was the traditional kind of model as the vets, develop and grew up through the practice. Then there was the offer of partnership or ownership at that point. So that traditional James Herrick kind of model, and I think we just caught the end of it, as it were. It's a model which isn't really so fit for purpose nowadays. We came in like 2007 onwards into the leadership team at that point.
Okay, so 2007, traditional partnership model. You guys have been building it, growing it, developing it since 2007 with innovation and best practice. You've expanded the number of sites, and at some point you're starting to think about, hey, we need to look at the transfer of leadership. How did that conversation start?
How long have we got, really? I mean, and it's one of those conversations that we could do like 2 minutes on or a day on. I think one of the key things with this, because we've been around for such a long time, there's been a sort of generational handover, if you like, every generation of vets coming through, and we're the latest generation to have taken on the reins of the practice and that mantle of ownership and leadership from the previous generation, who we learnt from and who we in part were mentored by and certainly took a lot from their experience. Now that then meant the question for us then becomes, well, what's our legacy? Because when you start in anything, it tends to be about what can I get, what can I learn? You're absorbing knowledge, you're absorbing information and experience. then you get to a certain point, and it then starts to be about, what can I give?
Yep.
You know, what when I'm no longer here, what will be here? You know, what mark do I leave? And you know, we very much wanted to make sure that whatever we had set in place and the planned was going to leave the practice and the team, most importantly, in a better place than when we found them. Not to say they weren't in a good place then, but to make it even better. And as Matt was saying, that traditional model of coming up through the ranks and then buying in at a certain point, really, with the value of practices these days, and with the challenge of borrowing, you know, those sums of money, really financially it's more or less impossible for someone coming up through the ranks to do that now in a way that's remotely sustainable. The challenge then becomes, what are your options? And realistically, up until we decided that we were going to chuck a brick through that particular paradigm, it was either that route, which really for a practice like ours is no longer a viable route, give it away. And we know people who've basically kind of just given their practice away to somebody because they're worn down and worn out, and they just wanted out. Yeah. Which is a crying shame when someone spent their life building that.
Absolutely.
Or a corporate sale. So the veterinary market has 70, it's now nearer 80% of the market is owned by the big corporates. So lots of venture capital backed corporates, ones that people might be familiar with, like Vets for Pets, IVC, Linnaeus. There are a number of Medivet. There are a number of very well-known corporates with hundreds and hundreds of practices.
Yeah, and is that just because people can't afford to buy practices anymore because, you know, they've grown over the years and they've come out of the price range of the practitioners?
I think to an extent, yes. And again, it's the market forces dictate this to an extent, but equally, it's the fact that with a corporate, their buying power is enormous. And so a lot of the time they can offer us a multiple or a sum that is so far beyond the range of anybody else, a private individual buying in, whether they're coming from inside or outside the practice, that, you know, when people are realistically are looking at well, what's my legacy, but also I want to secure my future, you know, nobody can blame someone for looking at, I've worked so hard all my life, I deserve to see the fruits of my labors.
For sure.
And unfortunately for a lot of people, that's meant they've really only had one choice, which is a corporate sale. And that's not to say that's good or bad, that's just the reality. What we looked at was that for us, we'd seen a lot of practices do that, and then the person who sold not really be happy afterwards because their purpose had gone, and there was a sort of lingering level of low-level guilt there to an extent. And I think for being a caring profession, that's understandable, but equally, we'd seen challenges for the teams in the practices to an extent losing a certain amount of their identity and their culture, because rather than being sort of small, unique, we are so-and-so vets, and that's our identity. If they're subsumed into a bigger entity, however benign that entity is, there can be a loss of identity and a loss of purpose there. So there's a kind of drip of that, and maybe some of the more ambitious or the better performers actually deciding I want to work for an independent vet. That's part of my identity. So it was a really tricky piece, that. So we looked at it and said, there has to be another way. This cannot be the only option open to people. And, you know, this is not credit to me. This is absolutely credit to Matt and Caroline, our other director, for actually finding the employee ownership opportunity and route there. And I'm going to hand to Matt to talk about this now.
Okay, so we felt it's the right thing to do. We were asking around the profession and the advisors, if you like, within the profession and external professionals, and there didn't seem to be any real information forthcoming, if you like. We were told it wasn't possible to do these things, or you can't gift the shares to people. We felt some type of employee ownership structure was the right way to go forward for all the things Andy had said. And in the end, we just turned to Google and thought to ourselves, well, John Lewis is there, so let's just Google it and find out how it works. And then we came across the EOA, and went to a conference and went from there. The learning journey was quite interesting through the whole process, and we hadn't heard of any other veterinary practices at that point who have an EOT structure, but there are indeed 3 other ones, and they've been around for quite some time. And I think the circumstances how they became EOT is slightly different to ours, where they were perhaps exiting partners, or I think one's a startup as well, which is actually interesting as well. So from our point of view, having a reasonable sized practice, mid-career leaders, if you like, we're not going to be retiring anytime soon, and then choosing to sell it into an EOT, which I think was a fairly unique kind of position within the industry.
Okay, so you went to Google, you absolutely believe there's got to be another way.
Yeah.
Did the most obvious solution, went to Google, found the EOA, the association. So I spoke to Deb Oxley last week. So that's an interesting connection there.
Oh, that's interesting.
And you started learning about the employee-owned options. And
yeah.
So what are the other options you considered? You ended up with an EOT route. What are some of the other options you looked at and ruled out, and why?
So to be honest with you, the other options we thought about were, so we had thought about those other kind of mechanisms with EMI shares and all the rest of it, and they were just not for us for various different reasons. And the EOT was the best structure.
Yep.
That way for us. In terms of so there's other options were a sale to trade to the consolidators, and that pre-existing James Herrick kind of model was, even if the same multiples had been paid, we'd grown the business by 2 times, or by 100% at that point actually. So and for us to raise money in those days, pre 2008, if you like, it's just a different situation nowadays. And I think for some people as well, attitude to debt as well has changed. Whereas it was more standard in those days to put your house on the line and everything else. That was kind of what you did, and there was no question about it. But I think perhaps some attitudes for some people have changed, and they prefer not to take on that kind of burden sometimes, perhaps.
Yeah. And interesting, because I guess the students or the younger generation already got a whole lot of debt from their education. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the millennial, or the generational change is a better way to put it, and their different attitudes. So employee ownership is a good option. So we've down the EOT route. Now the EOT structure is, what percentage of the business did you put into the EOT?
Okay, so previously Andy, Caroline and I were all at parity, so we all owned a third of the company each, and we decided to sell 70% of the total amount of shares into the EOT. So the EOT holds 70% and we retain 10% each.
Okay. And how did you approach the idea with the employees? You've come up with the idea, we want to go employee ownership. Yeah. You had to raise it with the employees. How did that go? What was their first response?
Honestly, we know our team really well, and we've a big team now. 5 years ago, we were about 55 people. Last payroll was 100. So we've been through a tremendous period of growth there, and by personality, most of them are relatively conservative with a small c, risk averse, caring. Sudden change is something they need to get their heads around. So what was critical for us when we launched it was being really, really clear about what it meant for them and what it didn't mean for them. Fundamentally, that all the risk was being taken by ourselves in doing this, because we were trusting them to continue to do the same great job they've been doing for the last many years going forwards, so that this would be a success. So a big thing was that there was no risk for them. It wasn't costing them any money. Their benefits weren't changing. Their salary wasn't changing. Their contracts, that was a huge one. No new contracts, because that sort of thing. This is all about trust. In any business, trust is the bedrock of high functioning teams. If you don't have the trust, everything else falls apart.
Yeah.
We have a team with a huge level of trust. We trust them implicitly, and they have high levels of trust in us. And so it was fundamental that everything we did and said backed that up. Okay, so really, really clear, honest communication about what it meant. The overriding message was, it's all change but no change. So the day before the EOT, we all turned up to work and did a great day's work. On the day of the launch, we all turned up and did a great day's work. The day after the launch, we were all going to turn up and do a great day's work. We're all staying. We've all still got skin in the game. We still own our percentage of the company. So this is why this is such a different approach from what typically gets done with EOT, which is it's an exit play.
Yeah.
And again, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But as Matt said, that's not the stage of our careers that we're at.
Yeah. This is a strategy rather than exit.
Exactly. I'm the oldest of the three of us, but I've got plenty of fuel left in the tank. What the hell am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm not going to twiddle my thumbs at home. I'll go mad in about 2 weeks. So, this is about now being able to really launch forward in the next phase of the practice, which is incredibly exciting, with the employees front and center of that, with the team front and center of that. So
the management team stayed the same. And just for clarity, just for the listeners, you've put 70% into the EOT, and you've mentioned to them they're not taking any risk, so there was no funding for the EOT. I'm taking it, and the payment for that is that the EOT is effectively incurred the debt, and that debt will be paid by the dividends over the future years. Until some point that the debt is paid off. And then they, through the trust, become the 70% owners of the business. Well, they already are 70% owners of the business. But,
So I mean, we have those loan notes for the business at the moment, and we will draw that money over time. But that's not to say that we probably will organise a dividend or something at some point before that's paid off, because I think there needs to be some recognition, if you like, it needs to be seen to have the benefit, if you like. So we will take a view on that at some point, and make a judgment call as when the right time is. But we hope it will be sometime, not a long time away.
Yeah, that was my very next question. So, and the other thing is that when you put the EOT together, you would have said, done some calculations based on our current profits and our growth, the 70% should be paid back over X amount of years. I would have thought you did some modeling like that. Yeah. How many years was it? Out of curiosity.
So we actually didn't do how many years it would be for a couple of reasons. One is we're on a growth path at the moment, so that was going to be hard to predict. So I mean, from our point of view, we just went, okay, we know we're going to get it with time, and so we're quite relaxed about when it comes out, as long as it's coming out in a fair and reasonable manner. So we actually haven't put a time limit to it, because if the practice needs that money to grow, and we're daft to take that money out and put it in our own pockets when the practice needs that money. So we'll just use that. We'll just use our judgment with that.
Funding growth, and so it's a year by year business strategy case. Okay, brilliant. So the employees are now in the EOT. They've got some education. You had to explain the levels of risk, but they're now part owners of the organisation. Once they'd learned and understood what the EOT was and how it works, what else has changed? Has there been any changes in the culture, in their attitude, in perhaps their understanding of requirements of running a business and strategies and the financials?
Okay, right. So it's been a couple of weeks at the moment, and the team itself, I mean, and I should have let Andy answer this, shouldn't I? So the team itself has a lot of what we would call sustaining energy. So it takes a while to think about things and for things to percolate and settle down. It's just the nature of the profession. So I think all that is still being absorbed at the moment. And in a way, I mean, and all that will come through. They've got pretty good exposure as it is to data and everything else. So the place was well run beforehand, and it remains to be well run, if that makes sense. So all that kind of input and decision making and exposure to numbers and everything else, that's already there. And I know those are things which make an EOT great, but they're also the things which make a normal business great.
Absolutely.
I think the other crucial thing is that the overwhelming feedback we had the following day was, we're really happy that we're not going to be sold to a corporate.
Yeah.
That across the board, across all the sites, when we spoke to all of them the following day, that was the overriding consistent feedback. And quite honestly, that was it's a wonderful thing about having done this, is that it will stop people asking us regularly, are we going to sell to a corporate? Because it was a question we got so often, both from outside and inside the team, and from the wider profession as well. So it's lovely to have been able to put that to bed. It's also a big one for the clients as well, because a lot of our clients really care about the fact that we're independent, and a lot of them have come to us from practices that have previously been taken over elsewhere. So that identity piece is really, really important, and that just really confirmed what we already knew and what we were really confident was the case, is that was the overriding concern for most of them.
Brilliant. So a lot of organizations, when they go employee owned, they use that as part of their marketing to promote that the business employee owned. Is that something that you guys are exploring?
It's developing as we speak in that respect. It certainly seems to have got a lot of attention. We are getting a lot of practices contacting us, asking for help and learning our story and understanding our journey, and that's independent practice owners. And then as time goes by, it will filter out. But at the moment, we've not put any adverts out in the last couple of weeks for us to be able to go join an employer in practice.
Equally, as far as marketing to clients go, for instance, then that's all in process at the moment. So we've already had, obviously speaking to you today, which is lovely to do. We've been front page of the Vet Times, which is one of the periodicals that goes around every week to the entire profession. So we've had a lot of interest and interviews and things like this, and that will then roll out into the mainstream press as well, whether it's newspapers, whether that's radio interviews and the like, as well as for the clients too.
So it's pretty exciting times at Pennard Vets.
Oh, it's really good.
It's so exciting. It really is. It's been qualified quite a long time, and this feels like just a whole new adventure to be going on, and it's exciting to see the amount of positive feedback we've had from the profession and from outside the profession, as well as from inside the practice, and just looking at what the future can hold. It's really exciting.
Yeah,
it feels like we've just begun.
Okay, so it's still fairly fresh in your minds from the time, so in terms of how long it took, so from the time you first decided that an EOT was the path that you decided on, you figured this is the best culturally and commercially for us and where we want to take the business, both for us personally and the business as a whole, as a legacy. How long did it take to, I guess, find an advisor and implement it and get it happening?
So we probably started investigating probably 2 years ago, I would say, and then it was knocking around. Obviously, we've had COVID in the middle, and that kind of took 6 months off it. And in reality, once we'd made the decision, it was fortuitous. We met the advisor we did at that time. It was a serendipitous moment, if you like, because something wasn't clicking with the advisors we'd currently spoken to at that point, if that makes sense. So it's like all these things. It's the people you know, isn't it, or the people you meet that help you on the journey. But that said, though, I think if we hadn't met that particular person, fate would have presented somebody else, and then it would have happened just in a slightly different way.
Okay, so was that about 2 years all up?
Yeah, it has been 2 years. Yes, yeah, 2 years.
Okay. And with the switch of advisors and COVID in between, which caused some delays.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was, as Matt said, there was a good 6 months of obviously that from the beginning of COVID hitting that things like this had to understandably go in holding pattern, because it then becomes about just making sure everything's going right, we're taking care of everybody, and we've got a sustainable model for getting through that period of time, so that we could then the last 6 months get back onto track with it.
And I think if there's other businesses out there, so some businesses, if they're in the right location, or if the right part of their journey and maturity, like as a company, then it could actually happen quite quickly for them once they make that decision. If their teams are up to, have got good communication, good feedback, good continuous development, all those types of things, all those good things which make something good, that could happen quite quickly. And especially if the leaders are staying on, if there's an exit planned and the company's not in the best shape in terms of communications and everything else, then I think that's when you need that kind of work in the run up to an exit, if you didn't have the strong leadership remaining.
More preparation and get the business ready, whereas you already had a lot of that in place. Okay.
I think this is a really important point, is that becoming an EOT doesn't magically make a business a brilliant business. It magnifies what the business already is. And same way you build a house, you've got to start with the foundations. That's culture, that's teamwork, that's trust, that's communication. That all has to be really, really strong and solid and consistent right the way through every layer and level of the business before you start down that route.
Yeah, I'm really glad you made that point. That's something really, I think that's critical. We see a lot of the stats out there about employee-owned businesses, how they're more productive and profitable and what have you. But it's easy to slip into the mistake to think, hey, look, if I just become employee-owned, look what's going to happen. I think what you're suggesting is, you need those good cultures and good business principles and practices in place anyway. Employee ownership just allows you to leverage those.
Totally. You get rewarded in public for what you practice in private. It's what goes on behind the scenes. It's all of that groundwork and that preparation before, you can sort of whip the cover off and go, yay, we're an EOT. Well, that's great, provided actually when someone looks under the hood, they don't see a mess. You've got to have it solid.
Okay. So you're going down, so let me back, you're going through the program of implementing and doing what you have to do. What are some of the gotchas that come up that are worth highlighting for someone who's right at the beginning of their journey and exploring EOT?
You need to find people who are aligned to where you want to go from an advisory point of view, because there will always be, and it doesn't matter what field you're in, what sphere you're in, what sector you're in, I guarantee there will be people who say, no, you can't do that. Or they don't share your vision, and those that do.
Yep.
And there's no point trying to fight the current and swim upstream. Find people who are aligned, understand your values and your vision and what you're about and your ultimate outcome, and can really get on board and work with that. It's so much easier, because when we found those people, the process accelerated massively, didn't
it did, and that's what I was thinking about when what you're saying is that you have to know what the outcome is. You have to know your purpose and be strong to that. And actually, in the face of people saying to you, you can't do this, you can't do that, understand what you want and actually go, you're a wonderful advisor, you're very good at what you're doing, but you need to see it from my point of view or whatever. And if there isn't that option there, then you just need to be patient. It's a bit like when you make a hire, you wait for the right person to come through the door to take them on. You don't actually just employ the first person who walks through the door, do you? Just because they're available. you've got to hire the right person.
So get the right advisor up front. So what I'm hearing is even talk to a few who can help you with this, and find someone who's aligned to your vision, your values, your style, understands your business, and is aligned to where you want to take it. And then the process, because it is a long process where you're working together, to get this happening, will be a whole lot smoother and a whole lot less painful along the way. Great advice.
Yeah, and before you even get near the advisor, it starts with, you've got to be really clear about what your outcome is.
Yeah.
Not, oh, I'd like to be an EOT. Well, that's lovely. But first, why? The why is always the most important bit, because that's what gets you through the sticky times. But you've got to be really clear and really specific. Really, really specific. The more specific you are, the easier it is to share that, and then to know when you're getting there. If it's too vague, it's not going to work well.
And it's easier for the advisor as well, because they know what they're working with.
Exactly. And for you guys, so your why, if you like, and your clarity was, we didn't want to be consumed by another corporate and just have the whole industry go down that route, which is something that you've shared with me off air as well. But for you, this was a succession plan. So you've retained some equity each. What's the long-term plan, or the rest of the succession plan for that? If that's
the exciting thing with that is in all honesty, at the moment, as Matt said earlier, we're entering another growth phase, and so part of this has involved actually putting a further quality hires into our management team to produce a quality of senior leadership that's actually designed for where we're looking to get to, which means that we can focus increasingly on the strategy, on the vision, on where we're going. We're guiding the ship, but not spending our time changing light bulbs and getting too granular in the operational side of things, because we can have that much more influence when we're at that higher level, as it were, that more helicopter view, and then ensure that what we're doing is we're really focusing on where we're in flow. So where we bring the most value to the team and to the practice, because that's where we found, certainly over the last few years, when we've really been gunning along and the accelerator's been on the floor and we've been really flying as a team, and both as a director team, but also as a leadership and a practice team, when we've been maximally in flow. And so in terms of then people coming through, we're always training our teams. We're continually growing the next generation of leaders at every level. We've had a robust continuous improvement system within the team for years now, where we have this amazing brains trust, which is our team. Everybody from the weekend cattery assistant through to the most senior management, everybody sees things that others don't. Everybody has ideas that others don't. We capture that. We have a system and a mechanism to capture that they run. The team owns that. Brilliant. So we're always actually leveraging that and utilizing that. The other thing is, we're training that leadership team from within. As leaders, one of our primary responsibilities is to create more leaders.
Yes.
So we're encouraging that responsibility from within the team. We're empowering the team because we have a clear vision. We have a clear set of values that's clearly understood. As long as people are making decisions in alignment with those values and that vision, we'll always support them. Okay. If something doesn't work out quite right, it's a learning piece.
Absolutely. So the EOT is phase one, longer term strategy. You guys are going, we're not going anywhere soon. It's kind of an all-in strategy. The next phase, we've got a big growth phase moving forward. Now we've now got all hands on deck. Everyone's rewarded and aligned to the vision, because we get, our growth, our benefits are the same for everyone. So we're all on the same page. And at some point in the future, we haven't identified what that looks like yet, but there will be a complete exit, when the timing's right, and that will include when the next layer of management team is also up to speed and fully ready. So that sounds really exciting, guys. So I've got one more question, if I may, if you indulge me. So there's something to share with the listeners out there. You've now gone through the process. The EOT is in, it's up and running. You've got a great staff. What's one thing you wish you knew at the beginning of the process that you learned along the way?
Oh, good question.
That is such a good question, isn't it?
It is. In a way, we went from this feels like the right thing to do, let's explore the idea, to then going, we definitely want to do this. And almost we hadn't actually written any of that down. In a way, we hadn't written the purpose down. We hadn't formalized it. We all knew it. We were using the right language. We were using some language to each other. So, I wonder if it would have been an easier process for us, because we would have attracted them the right people to work with us if we had actually set the intention down at the beginning. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great insight.
Yeah, I think the other thing is go with your gut.
Yeah.
So trust your gut instinct is there for a reason. That second brain down there, it works.
True.
And all the way along, it felt right, didn't it? And there were certainly times where you have your doubts and you start to, your conscious mind messes with you. Your chimp starts to get involved. And the but what if, and the negotiating, and then the catastrophizing starts. But all the way along, it come back to your gut, because at the end of the day, you can spend a lot of time messing with yourself in your own head and come back to where you were before. So just cut that bit out. And don't be ridiculous. It's got to make sense as well, but trust your gut.
Yeah, that's a great one. Business owners, trust your gut and write down your vision and your passion and your purpose, so that it consolidates your thinking. You're really clear, and that enables you to communicate it with everyone in the same way every time. I love it. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate your time on the Exit Insights podcast today.
Thank you very much.
It's been a total pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Cheers.